So it's pretty simple. You get everything kind of grouped up into an area, you hit it with the Bone Spirit, and then you Blood Mist to clear out the rest of it. You might have just come from watching my Infinimist video. That's what we're going with, Infinimist. We're trying to popularize that. I think it's the best option for it. But the base kit is the idea that Blood Mist can go infinite by using this aspect to trigger its own corpse explosions and also reduce its cooldown, and basically you go infinite. And the question was basically, what's the best build to use with Infinimist? I think it's Bone Spirit. I think this kind of does everything that you want it to do. And I'm looking at the build and it's missing easily half of the points I would want to put into skills at this level, but you don't have enough points. And I can't imagine like how aggressively this is going to scale once we can get above level 25. But let me go ahead and run this dungeon and you can kind of just see what I'm talking about. I'll include timestamps to everything down below, so you don't have to worry about that. You can just skip to the parts that you want to see. I'm going to run Anica's Claim. I'm not going to run the whole thing. We just finished it, just to make sure that I can kill a boss. My Bone Spirit took the boss for Anica's Claim from about 80% down to about 5% life, and then 2 corpse explosions killed it. You can test it yourself if you want. Obviously, testing in the beta doesn't really matter, but needless to say, it actually does single target damage very well. But again, let me run this dungeon. You can see it for yourself. We'll go over the build, the abilities, how I built out my Book of the Dead, or more like Book of the Sacrifice in this case. And hopefully you get similar results to this kind of nutty build. And like you just saw, it's kind of grody. Blood Mist is already off cooldown. Bone Spirit is also already off cooldown. You don't even need to do the Corpse Tendrils portion of it, but that will no doubt make it much stronger once we have more points to be able to put into it. For clearing out general density, it's fine to just hit it with Blood Mist, since if there's enough monsters, you'll typically fully reset its cooldown. There we go. And then it's whenever you walk up to a boss, you walk up, you hit him with the Bone Spirit, and then you hit him with the Blood Mist to finish off everything else. If they don't die, you'll always summon at least 1 spirit at the end of that, or rather 1 corpse at the end of that. So you can use that to corpse explode and typically finish off anything that didn't die immediately. Boom, get them onto the big density here. Bone Spirit. And just die. It's just funny whenever it happens. I haven't quite gotten used to just how gross it is. Now, I wish I was recording while we were kind of testing this out just to see if it was good enough to make a video on. We actually ran into both a loot goblin as well as a butcher. And the loot goblin got away, but we killed the butcher eventually. So it can even go toe-to-toe with the butcher. You just have to kind of kite him a little bit just to make sure that you don't immediately die to his damage. And then the cool part about it is it does have a fallback plan. You'll notice there that our Bone Spirit didn't automatically kill, and then we didn't have Blood Mist off of cooldown because I was kind of chit-chatting while we were fighting that last pack. But the good part about it is that you can always just fall back on casting Corpse Explosion as it is. Like, it's definitely fine enough, and you'll notice bang, and he's dead. So let's talk about how the build works, and it's predominantly built around, again, this same concept of the Infinimist Necro. It's the idea of Blood Mist is going to trigger corpse explosions, and then Blood Mist doesn't slow you down any longer. The rest of it kind of doesn't matter. The other portion to this is that Blood Mist cooldown gets reduced. I'm going to look at our abilities, then the Book of the Dead, I'm going to come back to the gear, because the gear is going to be really subjective, but you bare minimum need this aspect, and I would say that this aspect is a close second level of importance as far as the overall build around Infinimist. The skills are pretty cool here. We are still using Acolyte's Reap just to be able to generate a corpse. Again, this is really important for being able to get a corpse tendrils down, for getting everything into a single area, so Bone Spirit hits everything, since Bone Spirit is an AoE skill, but the damage generally doesn't matter. The Reap is good because it hits multiple enemies and generates a ton of essence all in one swing, just in case you need it, but basically you never need essence on this build based off how we have it built. No core skills. Build doesn't need core skills. It has Corpse Explosion, Blood Mist, and Bone Spirit. But obviously we need to put in some points to be able to get down to the next core, and we're using Hewed Flesh here. Lucky hit, 12% chance to create a corpse. Corpse explosion itself has a 41% chance to lucky hit. Also helps that it's doubled against bosses, because when we come out of Blood Mist, we would have liked to have generated a lot of additional corpses and lowered its cooldown as much as possible. But Hued Flesh goes a long way to kind of keep the Infinimist rolling. 1 point Blood Mist is all you need, the damage doesn't matter. And then obviously Blood Mist creates a corpse every 1 second. Here, and this is kind of the crux of the build. Oddly enough, you'd think everything else is kind of how it works, but it's actually Grim Harvest. Every time we consume a corpse, we gain 9 essence. That basically means every time that we come out of Blood Mist, we're at full essence, so we can cast Bone Spirit. And we're going to touch on that again in a quick second, but that's the important thing to know here. And then we only have 2 points to put into Fueled by Death. I would absolutely put more points into this if I could, but you don't have enough in the beta. For Corpse Explosion, typically we would pick up Plagued Corpse Explosion, but we actually don't apply Vulnerable, Slowed, or Stunned really at any point. We kind of apply Slow, but in reality, it doesn't matter. So we're actually only picking up Corpse Explosion's radius is increased so that we are hitting as many monsters as possible. Nothing in the curse tree. And let's get down to Corpse and Macabre. So we're maxing out Bone Spirit. Bone Spirit's big mechanic here that you need to understand is that it deals bonus damage equal to the essence spent when cast. So not only does Bone Spirit do 112% of weapon damage, which is already a really good modifier, but it deals 3% per essence. And not only do we have increased max essence from our sacrifice of the mages, but even just on base essence alone, that means that it's doing 300% additional damage if you are at max 100% essence. So that's where we're getting these massive amounts of damage from. The secondary enhancement means that its cooldown is reduced when it crits, and we're going to be critting quite often. You'll see in the rest of our skills. So we should be able to Bone Spirit as often as possible. And then I gave it an additional 10% crit chance. You could go with generates essence per second, and if I was critting more often and had more cooldown reduction, meaning casting Bone Spirit more often, this might be important, but in this version of the build with the Infinimist corpse generation engine going, I don't think that you need it. Then I pick up 2 point Serration. Serration says a 1% increased chance to crit for each 10 essence that I have upon cast. Again, we're always casting at max, even if you don't have any additional max essence, that means that you just have an additional 10% chance to crit. And then Rapid Ossification. Every 100 essence that you spend is going to reduce the cooldown of bone skills. This doesn't seem super important, but sometimes Bone Spirit wasn't off cooldown when we would want to cast it. So I have at least the 1 point in here. I think realistically speaking, you could dump it into here for more crit chance. That would probably do better. When I was initially putting these points in, I was thinking, what would I ultimately build into? And I would basically max everything here if I could. But even, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I'm going to pop this into Serration and recommend just going straight into Serration. So this says without any additional maximum essence, you have an additional 15% chance to crit with Bone Spirit. And since we add that onto here, we have an additional 25% chance to crit. And I'll show you our stats later just so you can see what our total percentage is. In the Book of the Dead, we are sacrificing skirmishers for 5% chance to crit. We're seeing a pattern here. We are sacrificing the shadow mages because that's going to give us an additional 15 essence. So if we're at max essence, that's an additional 45% damage on Bone Spirit itself. It's also an additional 1.5% chance to crit. It's actually a little bit more than that, but I'm not going to get that nitty gritty. And then Golem Sacrifice. Oddly enough, the Golem being there just kind of means that monsters would be less localized to me. And I just want them right on top of me so I can Corpse Explode and Bone Spirit as efficiently as possible. The 10% increased attack speed helps us to reap slightly faster, which is like fine. It's good enough. And then the gear. Not too many like ridiculous changes here, but I'll go through what we have. Increased crowd control duration and damage versus unstoppable. This is not really relevant here since we do have the 1 point to Corpse Tendrils, and Corpse Tendrils is going to stun. It is making that stun longer, which is good, but it's not the most important thing. Obviously, we're using the Blood Mist package of aspects. We have the adding barrier whenever you damage an elite to get the scaling from damage when you have barrier up. Boots don't matter. This right here is a massive multiplier for us. So the skills are going to do more damage based off of how much of our primary resource that we have, and at full, you gain the 62%. So since we come out of Blood Mist at full essence every single time, it's just an additional 62% damage on top of the 345% increased damage that we get on the Bone Spirit skill itself. This would be important if Bone Spirit was a core skill, but it isn't, and luckily enough for the monsters, that means that it doesn't scale at all. And that's kind of the interesting part. We currently have 1, 2, 3, 4 aspects that we could fill with other things. I'm not sure at this point what we would even put on it, because I haven't found any other damage scalars that would be really important. Theoretically, I could actually take this damage scaler and put it onto our amulet just to get that 50% bump. I just don't have another source of it, and I want to keep this active for testing out other stuff, but that's probably what I would do at this point. And then try to put an additional resource generation skill here. I noticed that there was a lucky hit % chance whenever you crit with bone skills to generate resource. Maybe I would toss that onto this ring, but I haven't seen every single aspect yet, or at least I don't think that I have, because people are still reporting aspects that I don't currently own for my character, but that's probably what I would put here. That's the build. It's nutty. It's hard to say. It's very good. It's much better against bosses because that Bone Spirit absolutely chunks. The only problem is you do run into scenarios where you run out of corpses and Bone Spirit isn't off of cooldown yet. And in those scenarios, it kind of just runs away until your 2 cooldowns come up, and then you generate a couple extra corpses, Blood Mist, and then Bone Spirit, and rinse and repeat. So I still don't think that it's perfect, but if you look at this skill tree again, let me just show you. I would love to, 1, be able to actually get a fully, at least get out to the Plagued Corpse Tendrils, and then also get out to the Plagued Corpse Explosion. I would also like to be casting a max level Corpse Explosion. I'd like to fill out this. I'd also like to be able to fill out this entire tree. So this is definitely a build that right now, even as it stands, has a ton of room to scale once we get out of the beta and we can actually put in more points. And I'm really interested to see how this one in particular functions, because I think it's at the top of potentially highest total AoE and single target damage output, which is something that I've been talking about a lot, which is the idea that once we have more skill points, we can kind of marry these two concepts together in the Necromancer. And I think we can shore up almost all of their issues as far as farmability is concerned. And if that's the case, the Necro looks like it's in a really, really good place for late game farming, and I'm excited to see that. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that it goes a long way to show you another really cool build that basically is using the minimum of skills and getting a wild outcome. But thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.